Do you have warmth settings on your light? Because you are a blue.
Here.
Much, little better? Is there a warmer setting?
No, it's just brighter.
There.
Hang on, this one?
That's close enough. What I can do
Hang on,
on
I've
my
got this.
side.
I've got two. No, that's blue. That one?
Yeah, let me see what I can do on my side is try to match your level. Which, no, that's warmer. I'm going for a suntan. Let me see if I can match your level of gray.
Yeah, you look pretty gray.
I think that's probably it. Maybe I can get it in post. Because what happens is I've tried applying a filter to like one of our faces and it makes the other one the complete opposite. So I'm like, oh, let me either cool me down. It makes you a Smurf. Or if I'm like, let me warm you up and it makes me a
Simpsons character.
Sure. We'll go with that.
Got it.
So
my kids have been watching a lot of Simpsons lately. Like us, I feel like us talking about it has made it like them. Yeah, triggered them. And also like, they're like, oh, like it's totally okay for us to watch Simpsons all the time.
Mom said in the podcast, they have it recorded on there. We talked about this already. They're Kevin McAllister. What's that thing called again? The Yak Back.
Yeah. They're gonna play it over and over again every time because like there have been times they were watching the Tree Houses of Horror because it's Halloween week. There's one for me.
All right. You are recording, right?
Yes, I am recording. So because it's the week of Halloween, they've been watching all the Tree Houses of Horror, which are extremely violent when you're watching them with like a small 8-year-old child who's never been exposed to violence before in his life because he's our special precious little boy. And he'll like, we're watching them. And he was like, this is extremely violent. Like it was the one where it's the Hansel and Gretel episode where they go find the lady in the woods, and that was a load bearing candy cane, and she has a pretend boyfriend and they put her in the fire. her boyfriend's name is George Cauldron. And and anyway, they were watching that one and they pushed the witch into the fire at the end of it. And Aaron was like, this is really violent. And I'm like, okay, well, you want to watch Simpsons, you're going to have to watch all of Simpsons. You can't cherry pick.
You got to get used to some violence, all right? Words to live
by. I was watching this when I was 4 years old. You need to deal with it.
Just keeping score and challenging on things that shouldn't be challenged at all.
I'm like, it did make me aware that I'm like, probably do need to get Aaron out there a little more. He was so
I love how that's the conclusion. You're like, this sweet, gentle boy was like, I don't think they should be killing people on TV. And you're like, you need to get out more.
Toughen up, bud. This is the world we live in.
Get used to it.
He was so thrilled about his inclusion in the podcast last week. I picked him up from school and I had it like all queued up because he's been asking me for weeks since we recorded it, and we record these like 4 or 5 weeks in advance. So he's been asking me since then, like, is it time? Is it my episode yet?
Are we live?
No. Are we live? And so I waited till I was picking up from school and I queued up the episode to where he talked. And I was like, Aaron, I've got a big surprise for you. He's like, okay, did you buy the surprise? I'm like, no. He's like, are we going to the surprise? I'm like, no.
Can I wear the surprise? Can I eat the surprise?
It's your podcast. And he lost his mind. And he's like, I can't wait to go to school tomorrow and tell everybody I'm on a podcast.
Well, I'm very glad that we did that, because now on a daily basis, Noah is asking me when she can join the podcast. And
why not all of them?
Yeah, and the timing just doesn't align for Noah to be on the podcast.
Oh yeah, she's never there.
Yeah. So I'm like, well, maybe on a weekend we can record a podcast, or like maybe you and I can just practice. And the thing about Noah is that she believes that she's got it. Like, I got it. Like, she won't. I'm like, all right, let's practice. And she'll literally be like, no, Daddy, I got it. I'll do it. I'll do it by myself. Daddy, I can do it. I'm like, you've never done a podcast before. All right. You've never done one.
You have no clue about podcasts.
You're not a podcaster. One of us in this room is a podcaster. It's not you. So listen to the coach. All right. Anyway, she'll be on eventually.
I think people need to be aware of how off our schedules are, so that when we record, you're recording like at 10 o'clock in the morning, correct?
It's noon. It's
around
noon
there.
Here. It's noon.
No. Okay. And I'm always recording at 9 at night. So we are in different, I feel like we're in different like frames of mind when we're recording, both of us. Like you're just like getting the day going and I'm
I'm
winding
sorry.
down. And I
I'm
really
sorry.
think
I
we
have the
can do that.
luxury of just getting the day going at noon.
Luck,
Like I
lucky
haven't been
you.
like I haven't been up for 5 hours already, dropped Noah off at school, spent time with my little one, did a little bit of work, and also went back to Noah's school because today they had horses at the school and I was watching them do some horseback riding. Hold on, I got to fix a light. I've got a cool story about this too. Hold on, let me go around the back and make sure it keeps flickering. And I don't think we're going for a strobe effect.
We could.
All right, that should be good.
I just picked up my phone. I'm like, oh, and Ryan sent me a message. It's just the link for the podcast we are doing right now.
I better jump on.
But I was really excited about it.
So yeah, I just mentioned that the light was flickering here. Last night, I know where our podcast is going today because of the homework assigned, and I got some stories about that. But in the episode that went out this week or last week, I guess, in the episode that went out last week, we had talked about how like kids pick up weird little sound bites, right? Like Aaron saying, "You don't know how much this means to me." Right? Or him starting the podcast, which I loved and I had to keep, which was him going, "This is so special to me." I was like, this
is so special to me.
And also the way that he changed his voice when he was talking about the original Mario game, and he was like, and you just play it. And he like whispered it, and I was like, this is so good. Just so good.
My favorite part was actually when you and he started laughing, and he laughed like a little bit too long because he was trying to match your level of laughter, because to him, there's a giant on-air sign above my computer, and he was like really putting it on, and that laugh like killed me.
I wish, if you're listening to this and you haven't seen the video from the episode that we put out last week, which was, what did we talk about?
Super Mario Brothers.
Okay. If you haven't watched the video that goes with the Super Mario Brothers episode, watch it, because you'll actually see Aaron trying to match the laugh energy. He tries to get to my level of cackle, but he doesn't realize there's 42 years of hard work and effort to get to this. But I think the video really rounds it out, because I've listened to it, obviously. I've also seen it multiple times because I did the edit on both. And seeing him like, I feel like he checks down a little bit, sees that I'm still cackling, and he tips his head back even further. He's like, So in the spirit of that, Noah and I have started doing this thing. So Noah is very much a porter because she's my child, but also she tends to look 1 or 2 steps into the future and like stress, worry, anticipate what's going to be happening, and tries to like kind of prepare for it. So I've like read about all these techniques. I read parenting books sometimes, and I was reading about techniques about how to like equip children for hopefully trying to like kind of like nip it at the bud there and not allow going down the spiral of like, she's also 5, so I'm not that worried about it, but it's very much me projecting, of course, but just trying to like maybe get ahead of it a little bit and stop the conversation of like, but what if? And so one of the things we do is, so for example, at night when I have to start work, because I work, a little bit during the day when she's at school, and then I work the rest of my time when she's asleep at like from like 8:30 till 12:30 at night. And she's doing this. She's very much in the phase of, "Daddy, don't go. Daddy, don't go. What if this happens? What if this happens?" And so we do this thing now where we call filling up the tank, and we squeeze each other, give each other a really big hug to try to fill up our hug tank. And I also squeeze her teddy bear so that it's filled up. And then she knows that at night, right, if she wakes up and I'm not there, that she can squeeze the teddy bear, and she also has a tank full of daddy hugs. The other thing we do is we talk about some of the feelings that she might have when I say it's time for me to go, right? I'm like, what are some of the things you might say? And she's like, "Daddy, don't go." And I'm like, yeah, I've heard that before. And like, what else might you say? And she'll say a few other things. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. Well, let's practice. And we'll just get it out of, like, I want it out of her system when I'm there, and it's way before. So yesterday she's in my office. We have you can come in my office whenever you want rule. Except if you see that I'm on a call, just stay off to the side a little bit and wait for a thumbs up from me to come this close. So she comes in the office. I'm not on a call. It's a Sunday night, and I'm just kind of like chipping away at the edit on the podcast. And she's playing around with my camera, you know, stepping on boxes and stuff that we have in the office. And then she went behind my desk and somehow pulled out the cable of my hard drive. And the hard drive is where I store all of the podcast data. And so right away, my system's like, damaged disk, everything disappears. And I'm like, very calmly, because I'm aware of how worked up I can get, I'm like, no, what did you do? And she's like, nothing. I'm just back here and I did this. And she goes, I'm like, did you touch a wire? She's like, I touched this one, but I didn't touch this one. Now she's touching all the wires. And like my lights are flickering. And I'm like, okay, whatever you're doing, can you please stop and step away from the back of the computer? She's like, why? I didn't touch anything. And I'm like, because I'm asking you to. And she's like, yeah, but you say I can come into your office. I'm like, you can, but can you please step away from that right now? And so she steps out there and you could see her watching me and she leaves the office. Okay. Because she could see that maybe things are about to boil over. So she leaves the office. I'm frantically trying to figure this out. And she's already preemptively, if that's even the word, briefing Seiko on what has happened, skewing in her favor. Like, Daddy says I can always come in his office, and I was just in his office and something happened to his computer. Like, those are two separate events. So anyways, I was like, Noah, what did you do? Nothing. Tell me, like, what did you do? Nothing's working. My podcast is gone. And now she's a little bit, you know, worked up that I'm worked up. So I figure it out. I restore it. I lose about 20 minutes of work. That's not a big deal. And I call her back in here and I'm like, okay. I'm like, Noah, what do you think we can do next time to make sure that like something like that doesn't happen? Thinking that I'm prepping her to be like, don't go behind the computer. She goes, oh, I've got an idea. I'm like, all right, here. She's a smart girl. She's going to know that just don't go behind the computer. She goes, let's record you saying what you'll say next time more nicer. I'm like, excuse you? She's like, I'm going to make a video and you're going to say what you will say next time, but nicer. And I'm like, no, that's not how this works. No, you are the, but I'm not saying that. This is what's going through my head. I'm like, no, absolutely not. But to her, I'm like, you know what? Good idea. Yeah, good idea. Let's go through this again. And so I've got a video on my phone right now where I'm like talking her through what she's allowed to do in my office and like nicely asking her to like not go behind there and us together trying to troubleshoot the damage that she's just done. But anyways, it's just that programming of like mimic what the parents do, but off by 15 degrees and somehow skew in their favor. Like, where do you get off?
First of all, I will put that video in the show notes.
That's never going to anyone.
But also when like, I've got kids and we have a wide range of ages, got little, and I've got an adult child and one in the middle. And I was thinking about how when we were younger, like the delineation between parent and child was extremely clear. Like it was clear that their word was law and we were just the kids. And I don't know if it's specifically like millennial parents or what, but I feel like sometimes my kids do see me more as a peer. And so when you're saying that about Noah, I'm like, Noah is seeing you as a peer, and that's what you do to her. And therefore she would do it to you because you know what I mean? Like the delineation between parent and child is not the same as it was when we were kids.
Oh,
like even just the option to be like, hey, mom, dad, I have some notes about the way you've been acting. Like that would never happen when we were kids.
We're going to role play. We're going to workshop this a little bit. All right. Let's imagine I've just ruined your computer. What are you going to say? Nicer, a little bit more nicer, a little bit.
Try again.
Let's run it back. You haven't quite got this. It's not even that we're peers. She is levels above me in her brain. Like she's my manager.
She is your boss.
She's my manager. She's like a little bit. Can we do it a little bit more oomph?
Do you remember when we first got our computer when we were kids and Dad learned how to defragment the computer? And he was under I don't know who taught him about defragmenting or what, but anytime the computer had anything wrong with it, Dad was like, got to defragment it. And it would take hours because we had the world's slowest computer. And so he would like tape papers over the computer while it was defragmenting, and it would be like, defragmenting, do not touch. Be like, Dad, I gotta get on the computer. He's like, no, it's defragmenting. I'm like, you don't even know what that does, Dad. He would do it at least once a month.
And I feel like in his brain, it was like the equivalent of like an oil change. It's like after so many cycles, like you need to change the oil on the motorcycle. You must also defragment the computer after a certain amount of hours of it being operational. And I'm willing to bet, I didn't check this on his large novelty size calendar that was taped to the side of the refrigerator for our entire childhood. I didn't ever check it for this. I'm fairly certain it was scheduled on the calendar. It was like the second of every month, 11 a.m. Nah, that's way too generous. It'd be like, when are we all using the computer? Like 8 p.m.
Yep.
8 p.m. when everybody wants to get on the computer, defrag.
And to be fair, everything that was wrong with the computer is because we were downloading bootleg copies of Thong Song from LimeWire and Morpheus and Napster. So like we were just nonstop downloading viruses onto that computer. And anytime it was like mom and dad could not keep up with it. As soon as they delete Napster, then we'd go to the next service and get it through that. And then they delete that, we'd go to the next. Cause oh my gosh.
We had them all. We had them all. I was usually the one installing them because I had the most technical knowledge at age 16 and 17. I was there.
How has that worked out for you now that you have to edit podcasts for your sister? I really
set myself up for disaster on that one. Really created the dependency at an early age. What is going on with this
Ryan, can you put Braveheart on my computer and also edit this podcast for me?
You've dropped your rock.
All right. Somewhat related but not related, but also related. Have you ever, and this likely won't make it to the pod, but have you ever heard of the book Storytelling?
No. Is it nonfiction? Like it's a person talking about storytelling?
Yes, it's nonfiction. So I think you and I are very different in that sense, where we both consume, you're probably like 3 or 4 or 10 to 1 in terms of the volume because you read. I wish there was an analogy for how much you read, but you read an obscenely amount of books. Grammar on that, obviously, I'm not the one who reads. Obscenely amount of more books. But you read a lot. I read a little bit. Like I'm usually maybe a book every 2 weeks.
Okay.
Right.
Do you like how? Yeah, I guess that's fine for someone who's illiterate.
Three a day. Yeah, for someone. They're all picture books. It's literally just the Hungry Caterpillar. I read that once every 2 weeks. I make it my way through and I reset.
And you're like, I'm good.
I'm reading this book right now called Story Worthy. Sorry, not storytelling. So obviously I'm really paying attention. I also maintain I also retain a lot of the information from books that I read. So it's called Story Worthy. And it's about this guy who set out to like become a better storyteller and to determine or try to figure out what makes up good stories. And he ends up joining like this like story slam thing and then ends up becoming like a champion storyteller, which is a thing. He enters these contests. He now has his own organization for storytelling. He won like 48 out of the 56 times that he's entered the storytelling contest. Like he's won. And he talks about what makes a really good story. And he talks about like the way you tell the story obviously really, really matters. And the things you talk about really matters. And he talks about how one of the core things you should do with storytelling is you should always tell a story that other people can relate to. If you start like, when I was clinging for life underwater as my car sunk after being run off the road by a biker gang, he's like, not a good story. Because no one has experienced that. And the response will likely be like, wow, that's crazy. And there's no, like, it just kind of ends there, right? Because you've just kind of trumped everybody or you've put yourself somewhere on a different level than the rest of the audience. And so he talks about how like you should tell stories that people go, oh, like, yeah, the same thing happened to me. Or like, totally, I totally know what you're talking about. And then it kind of snowballs into this conversation. And he talks about telling stories the way that you would at dinner table and stuff like that. So I was listening to stories that we tell about digging Crispies out of the bottom of a deep fryer basket, wondering if these are the types of stories that other people are hearing and going, yeah, me too. Or people get to the end and they're like, oh.
No, about that specific story, I did get a message from one of my friends, and the message only said, the lady with the warts on her elbows at the chippy. Oh, take me back.
Okay, I need you to give me a
So,
second to
relatable.
swap out. Hold on. I need you to give me a second to swap out this light. Or can I get away with just turning it off?
It's a little shadowy. It's not terrible.
Hold on. Freaking Noah.
Oh, yeah. Nice and bright.
Maybe I will go with my hat backwards just because.
That's why I couldn't wear my hat.
Okay, that's good enough for today.
Really change it up. Changing up the looks.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for. But anyway, so I was curious, just like, are these the ones that people are, or are people like, we cannot relate, but not because this is such a grandiose story, but because we were not eating oil-soaked, deep-fried Crispies of batter out of the bottom of a deep fryer basket.
The problem with our family specifically, I think, is like we think every story is story worthy. Like there's nothing that we won't like. There's nothing that I won't call you guys up and be like, the craziest thing happened to me today, and it's like the most benign, normal thing that everybody experiences. But I'm like, I think everything's worth the story.
I wonder if it's because, or let me ask you the question: do you think it's because you genuinely think that's a good story? Or are you using it as a way to like bait other people to share their stories?
Probably the first one, because I'm actually not that interested in other people's stories. No, my thing is like, I do think like when I'm like experiencing things day to day life, not that I'm always like looking for the story, but I usually find things pretty funny. And so most things that happen to me, I'm like, I can make a story out of this because I'll probably find a way to make this funny. And so I think that's what I'm doing is no matter what it is, I'm like, I can make this into like a little entertaining tale.
A little bit?
Yeah, I can turn anything into a bit.
So it's funny that you should mention that because in the book Storyworthy that I'm reading right now, he talks about creating like a spreadsheet of daily stories. And so he talks about why it's important to use a spreadsheet. Most people would approach it as like a journal, right? Like writing out the whole thing that then takes like 10 minutes to read back. But being limited to a cell of like a 1 or 2 sentence thing about the story allows you, one, to have a little bit more like time and not have to worry like, oh, I got to do a journal entry, but literally just like write in one line about what happened and maybe like an emotion or a takeaway. And I think it's something that we're kind of doing with the podcast, which is actually weird. I was talking to Seiko about this morning. I'm like, I'm reading this book. These are some of the things I'm learning. This is what I found interesting. And I'm like, I wonder if we're kind of doing that with the podcast because we start off and we start talking about our week and we have like the craziest thing happen. I went to a car wash. Like that's actually a story, I think, in the episode that's coming out tomorrow. The Salem Witch episode. So I feel like we're kind of doing that, but I started it. I started it in my Notion, my personal Notion document. I added a spreadsheet where I am adding some like one-liners about some potential stories, and I just call it daily stories. But I have, I thought they were interesting. Anyways,
One day I'd like you to just read through only without any context whatsoever, just the words that you've put in the spreadsheet.
I'm happy to do some of them.
So Addie does a family quote book that she keeps on her phone. So anytime someone in the family says something like bizarre or funny, she just puts it in her little quote book. And every so often she'll just like pull out the notes app and she'll be like, here are the latest things that people have said. And some of them are legitimately just wild. And I'm like, actually delete that.
I'm happy that I didn't tell this so I could share them, but I'm happy to share. I'm happy to share a few if you'd like to.
All right, hit me with a couple.
Let me go. Let me go. Maybe 2, possibly 3. So Noah fell down while we were doing jump rope in front of Parlor Oki. It's this little like roadside restaurant that we go to. We got in the car and she said, I fell because of the grandma holding the jump rope. The grandma was a man and my age.
Okay, great.
This guy came and introduced. I was doing skip like our friends. They have this little like roadside parlor restaurant that they were closing down because they're opening up a community center, and it was their last day. So we went to kind of like say thanks and like bring them some gifts, and then we're playing on the sidewalk with all the kids doing like a jump rope game. It's actually just jump rope. I don't know why I made that seem like it was more complicated than it was. It was
it's
the Japanese version. It was
probably never heard of it.
Seen it on TV. So we're doing jump rope, and this guy came over to introduce himself to me because I was doing jump rope, and his daughter was. He's like, "Oh, thanks so much. Like, I'm her dad," but Noah wasn't there for the introduction. He took the jump rope, and then he was doing a different game, and Noah fell down, and she was pretty angry that this grandma made her fall down. So we got in the car, and she's like, blood's coming out. She's like, it's because that grandma with the skipping rope. And it was clearly a man, and he was clearly my age. So anyways, so that's one that made it into my story list. Noah rushing into the bathroom to beat the bedtime clock. I hear a bang. I come to check on her. She says, I think these fell in the toilet, while holding up 2 dripping packages of wipes with water all over the toilet seat and floor. She knew they fell in because she fished them out. She hasn't fully bought into nobody gets in trouble for telling the truth, but she's close.
She's getting there. One day, she's really going to appreciate all these.
She was really like inquisitive about it. She was like, I think these might have fell in the toilet. They're just dripping with toilet water. And I'm like, how? We have this little stand in. So first of all, the vast majority of Japanese houses have the toilet in its own room. Like not a giant, I'm not talking about a giant room. You walk in, you're like, what am I going to do with all this space? Drop a toilet. It's a very small little actual water closet, WC. It's like you open the door, there's a toilet. That's it. Yeah, you open up, there's a toilet. That's it. And then you usually, you wash your hands. Either there's a little sink in there, or there's another room right beside it that has a sink and a mirror and a washing machine or whatever. So anyways, in our little toilet room, as I like to call it, the TW, why W? I don't know. The TR? WR. I've started spelling room with a W. It's WROOM. We have this little like stand for all of like the toilet paper rolls, like they all like line up, and then there's this little tabletop on the top. And I guess we had wipes on there, and somehow in her rush to beat the bedtime clock, knocked that. It fell down and catapulted our 2 packages of brand new, freshly opened wipes into the toilet. She's like, I think these fell in. I'm like, oh yeah? Why do you think that? But anyway.
One time we'd gone on vacation, and usually before vacation, I clean the house. The house is always clean, and I turn off everything. Like I turn off the air conditioning, turn off whatever is on. And we'd gone away for a week. We were at Disneyland, and we came home, walked through the door, and the house smells so bad. Like I can't even explain how bad it smelled. It smelled like
what smell?
Like, you know when a mouse dies in your walls? Have you ever had that smell? Like very specifically, like there's something dead in my walls. That's what the house smells like. So we go in there and I'm like, what the heck? It smells so bad. Also, the air conditioning's been off for a week. So it's also like hot in the house.
Just muggy and dead mousy.
And so, yeah. And I immediately go into just like, I've got to find the source of the smell. I'm really sensitive to smells. It's like, I always say that it's the world's worst superpower is me being sensitive to smells. It's like, because there's no purpose except that it annoys me. Like if I smell something, I'm like, I'm super annoyed now. So I start just looking everywhere. I'm looking in every closet. I'm looking underneath like the washer dryer, like where could a mouse have died in this house? And I'm going crazy. Can't get rid of it. Spray everything down with like Febreze. And I figured like after I'd done that, like it should clear out. Like we open all the windows.
Sure, you got it somewhere.
Yeah. And so we went to bed, wake up in the morning, it's worse. And I'm like, this is like, I can't live like this. So I start taking out everything that's in a cupboard, everything that's in a drawer, one by one, like just tearing my house apart. And I start actually, this is the room, my laundry room, my studio. Start in this room and start working my way out and going one by one. And I start bleaching everything too. So I'm pulling everything out of cupboards, everything out of drawers, and bleaching the entire surface of everything. Cause I'm like, maybe just something died and I don't know where it is. And if I just bleach everything, I'll be fine. Do the entire house. And I mean, entire house. The last drawer that I do is the drawer where we keep like Ziploc bags. So it's just a small drawer in our kitchen. And I'm pulling all of them like off the rails so that I can put them down on the kitchen floor and like pull everything out and sanitize them. I pull it out, put it on the floor, pick up like the Ziploc bag box, and what's underneath it but a fish in a Ziploc bag. A fish. A whole trout. And I'm like, and I mean, it is like almost liquefied at this point. Like it's putrid. That's definitely where the smell's coming from. And I just start screaming like in a horror movie. Like I'm screaming. Justin's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm like, there's been a dead fish in here this whole time. And I'm like, how did it get here? Whose fish is that? Andrew, my 15-year-old, walks in the room. He's like, oh, that's my fish. And like picks it up. And I'm like, what do you mean that's your fish? He was like, oh, I went fishing with my friends the day before we left. And I was like, okay, and he's like, and like, I wanted to bring the fish home so you could cook it. And I'm like, and he's like, so I just put it in this drawer here. I'm like, what, like you put a dead animal in the drawer and just thought like one day in a week from now, I'd be like, you know what sounds good? This liquefied fish that's been in a hot drawer for a week without air conditioning. I was so mad. And it was so Andrew. I'm like, to first of all, not even like clock while I'm pulling the house apart like a psychopath.
They're like,
oh, it might be that fish. And then as soon as I find it, he's like, hey, wait a second, that's my fish. Like,
so that's, very much on brand with the nobody gets in trouble for telling the truth, but it's how and when you tell the truth that also really important. Matters. And maybe that's the next dimension of that rule.
The next lesson we teach to our peer children.
Yeah, our peer children, and see if they accept it, because there's a chance that Noah might just go, and I'm like, oh, you know what, you're right. You're right. I'll work on that a little bit more, and I'll present you a better plan in the future.
Did you have anything interesting happen this last week?
I just shared those things with you.
Other than that was
actually, I topped out. I shared my story spreadsheet. We dropped some wipes in the toilet. We practiced saying things nicely. I'm sure there are things.
Well, just because I did actually do something interesting. This is another one of those leading questions where one of us is like, who's the handsomest? Did you happen to find any dead fish in your drawers this week? Dead
no?
Fish,
What
right?
a weirdly specific question. Well, I did, actually. Let me tell you. I know it wasn't this week, but I tried to work it.
It wasn't this week, but I appreciate it. No, Addie and I went to Nashville.
I followed along. Well, I followed the entire adventure. I followed on Instagram.
I had truly the best time. If anybody wants to go to Nashville, just know, here's what I learned about Nashville that I didn't know. Nashville is for the girls. It is not for the guys. It is only for the girls. It is an entire city just built around the female gaze and what girls want to do. Every person I met there was in a bachelorette party. There were just hordes of women wearing cowboy hats and cowboy boots everywhere we went. And I was like, I love it here. I love it.
I have a couple of friends who have begged other people in our group of friends, all guys, to go to Nashville for this exact reason, right? Mind you, the majority of us are married with children, but there's a few single dudes still in the group. They're like, yo, let's go to, do you want to know what I heard about Nashville? And it's this right now. So someone, I don't even know if they listen to the podcast. I hope so. These guys, I'm talking like my best friends. They're going to listen to this and be like, see, bro, I told you, Nashville.
Full of girls. And like 3 very nice Southern gentlemen that I met who, like, I was like, I honestly don't think I opened a single door for myself while I was there. There was always, no matter where I went, there was just like a very nice Southern gentleman there to be like, oh, let me get that for you. And I was like, I love it here. I'm moving here. Forget it.
Because I like how that's how low the bar has become for you. You're like,
okay, well, you know how
a door.
I was thinking about when we talked about me going to Vegas, and I hate going to Vegas specifically because people want to take pictures and want me to look at things. Yeah. And I was like, in Nashville, I wanted to look at stuff, and I took pictures. That's how much I loved it there.
This speaks very highly of Nashville.
My eyes were open. Actually, there's a bunch of museums. There's the Country Music Hall of Fame, but there's also a museum of African American music specifically, and it's the coolest museum. You go in there and like you walk through it, almost it's like chronological, like where African American music would have started in the United States and how each each iteration built upon the last to create like what is now like hip hop or whatever. And I was like, you would have loved it. There was this giant machine that you could go up to and choose like an artist. That would create this graph to show you like who's the artist's inspirations, who's the artist's peers, and who they have inspired. And then it was like a flow chart. So then you could click on the next person in that flow chart and it would break out into all of their inspirations. It was like the coolest thing ever, actually.
Yeah, it does sound really cool. When I was living in North America, in Canada, I would have went to Nashville. I don't know if I'm going to make it to Nashville anytime soon. I don't know if that's really high on the list of places that I need to get on the flight for, but it was definitely cool watching, first of all, the adventure of you and Addie, which I also thought in itself was cool because I was thinking like the thought that it triggered for me was like, I'm not going to get to do that with Noah, right? Because when she is 20, I will be 58 or something ridiculous like that. What is that? 15 years from now, I'll be 57.
Oh my gosh.
And me and Noah are not going to be kicking it at the Nashville Museum of African American Music. It's just, she's going to be like, Dad, you are an old man. No one wants you around.
That's why I'm here, is I will take Noah. Noah will go with me. Like it's for the girls. It's not for you.
I want to be there. That's the whole thing. Is I was like, oh, maybe we should have got started 20 years ago.
Yeah. Pros and cons, for sure.
Yeah. Are you going to live your life before the kids or after the kids?
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically what I'm saying is you cannot live life when you have kids. That's the moral of that
story. No. If anybody takes anything from this podcast, you need to know that your life is over. From when your kids from the ages of 0 to 18, they own you.
Nail in that 18-year-old temporary coffin.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't have said it that way, but yeah, I agree.
So yeah, nothing. I didn't go to Nashville. Okay. I didn't go watch Post Malone's last show of his tour.
Well, he announced new tour dates, so it was kind of a bait and switch, to be honest.
Oh, all of the people who bought tickets being like, and this is the last show of the tour.
I was excited about this one because we saw Post Malone in Vegas on New Year's Eve last year. And we took our 2 oldest kids and they wanted to do pit tickets. And I have never experienced a pit concert experience before. And I was like, sure, like how bad can it be? The amount of standing was truly like, I think like people in jail don't stand as much even. Like there's no way.
Why would people in jail stand that? Why?
I don't know. It just felt like a form of torture, truly, because I promised myself I would stop saying truly. And I'm failing right now.
You're truly failing the most at not saying truly.
So you had to, because you were in the pit, you had to show up at much earlier than the concert even started to like secure because you don't have a specific spot. You're just in a swarm of people. So we had to go 4 hours early to even get our spots in the pit. And then we stood literally like 9 hours straight with no breaks. And it was like, at my age, like I felt like my knees were broken for 2 weeks afterwards. So this one, Addie wanted to go this concert. I was like, that's fine. I have to have a seat. I understand how old that makes me sound, but it's like, I just need to have a chair. Even if I'm not sitting in that chair, I need to know the chair is available to me. Otherwise I will start crying. So this one was so much more pleasant because every so often I could sit down and drink my little Diet Coke.
Sounds like a wild time.
We got pretty crazy in Nashville.
You know what they say? Nashville's for the girls.
That's for the girlies. We also went to Dolly Parton's bar, which really is synonyms, which really is designed only for.
You need to have, instead of slow down in the margin, you need to have a list of synonyms for all the words that you use.
So Dolly Parton's bar is made exclusively for girls. It was all bachelorette parties. Everything is like hot pink. There's a DJ only playing like pop girl songs. There's like flamingos. It was all done up like an old fashioned kind of motel, I guess. And it was the cutest thing I've ever seen. All the food was like girl food. It was girl dinner everywhere you went. It was just
what is girl food? Just for the record, so we can get the.
Here's the thing about girls.
Everyone to take note that the only person sending these normalize gender experiences to everything is Jacqueline. I want to make that very clear.
And also note that because you don't have any other sisters, this is the only way you're going to learn. So I'm teaching you.
Oh, sorry. This is
about
for
girls.
my education. Just so you know, this is how girls do it. I do have 2 daughters, so this is very, thank you for thinking of me.
Here's the thing that girls don't like. Girls don't like ordering one thing and committing themselves to that food, even if it's a really good food, even if it's a good burger. A girl does not want to commit herself to just one good burger. A girl wants to try all the little things from the menu, and she just wants to have a bite from every little thing so she can try every single one. So when I go to Dolly Parton's restaurant and everything on the menu is just like charcuteries and little appetizers and like fun little drinks and stuff like that's for the girls. She knew what she was doing with that.
All right, I get it.
So if this is also a dating podcast, which I could only assume that people looking for dating advice, if you
tune
want
into
to
a
impress
brother
a girl,
sister podcast.
if you want to, just don't make a girl commit to a full meal. You let her pick and choose.
Yeah, I would say that's some good advice. Usually
That's
usually when we sit down at a restaurant, meaning Seiko and myself, I will order something that I know Seiko also wants to eat, regardless of whether or not it was my first choice or not. And she always gets the first bite. That's something that I've always done since we were dating. My food arrives, I pass it to her so that she can take the first bite and then decide if it's something that she'd like to continue with and give me her scraps, or if she would like to go to her better meal.
Mine's always like, I'll get this and you get this and we'll share. Like, I don't even Justin doesn't have a chance to even order.
But there are times, don't get me wrong, like I'm not like doing this romantically with the best intentions. Like sometimes it comes and I'm like, all right, well, you need the first bite and you can't take my bite without knowing that your food is also here and ready to consume. So I will wait for you to get your food and then I will let you have the first bite. I am starving, by the way. And I don't really get the points because it's just like assumed. Right.
You're actively hurting your marriage now.
Yeah, exactly. That's, I want to make sure that people get something straight, that's something that's perfectly okay when you're dating. But once you're married, it's going to be the downfall.
Yeah. Don't start things that you can't keep going for the long run. Like really, again, keep the expectations low. I think that's another lesson we've learned from doing this podcast is when expectations are on the floor, the only way is up.
Keep them there and leave them there.
Yeah.
Put them there, leave them there. Keep them there, leave them there.
Keep them there, keep them there.
Preserve them there, keep them
there. Synonyms. I'm gonna also look that up. Do you have a question for this week? I've got a question that I'm just like genuinely interested in.
Are you truly interested in it?
Did you hear me try to say genuinely? I was trying so hard.
I'm trying to pull it back because I know that people are playing drinking games while they listen. No one.
I didn't realize it was so bad, and then I listened to the Mario Brothers episode, and I was like, "Oh, this is egregious. I need to stop."
That's also after I've edited out 900 of them.
I know. I've got to stop. So my question this week is: who was your celebrity crush when you were a kid, and who's your celebrity crush now? And like, are they similar?
Celebrity crush? You go first because I need to think about this because I know that there were a couple then. So you go and then I'll go.
Okay. When I was a kid, and specifically in high school, I had a picture of Harrison Ford in my locker.
What?
And which is really wild because he was 60 years old at the time that I was in high school. And I knew that, but I couldn't stop. As like a 14-year-old, I was obsessed with Harrison Ford, and to this day, I've always like a stern older man. What can I say? My husband is definitely a stern older man. So I married a stern older man. Like, but that is very much like a type that I think I like the challenge of being like that guy's in a bad mood, but like I think he'll find me charming. And so, like, I see it as, like, a test of my charm to get in there and be like, this guy's going to love me, even though he's real grouchy. So I really loved, I also really loved Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, too.
I do remember that, which is so weird.
Yeah.
So you look at that as, like, have you ever seen the documentary Free Solo, where that guy is, like, scaling the side of El Capitan.
El Capitan. Yep.
El Capitan. El Capitan. Without like any ropes or anything. He literally just like scales up the side of it. So you look at a stern older man with that same approach.
Yes.
Like, I can scale this. I can make him mine.
I want to climb that man.
I want to climb that man
Like
with
El
no ropes.
Capitan.
With no ropes.
No, it's just something about like I don't like people who are very outwardly outgoing or try hard at all. And so then I go the complete other way, like someone who doesn't try at all. Like I want people to think this man hates everyone. That's my type. Love it. But now as I've gotten older, I've definitely gotten a little softer in my old age. I still like they're still on my hall pass roster. But lately it's been very specifically the Han from Tokyo Drift, Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. If you'll remember, he is the friend of his that's always eating something, like he's always snacking on something in the background. Google it. Where's a picture of him? I can't remember what his real name is. Look up Han and Fast and Furious.
I actually would have been able to figure that out without you telling me what to Google. Thank you, Dad.
It's Han. It's Fast and Furious.
Dad always does that. He'll be like, just put in, and you can see him going through, like trying to crack the code. And it's the most obvious thing. He's like, just put in current weather in Tokyo. I'm like, thanks, Dad.
Yep, that's how we find out.
So Han Lu, maybe he's a fictional character in the Fast and Furious franchise. He's portrayed by Sung Kang, who is the character.
Yes.
Like the character himself, Korean descent. So he's got a little bit of a longer hair brushed across his forehead.
I was watching Tokyo Drift with my boys the other day.
Your boys?
My boys.
That's something I was with my boys. You are referring to your two children.
Are 15 and 8. Yeah, my 15 and 8-year-old children. But like we're watching it and Han comes on the screen and I'm like, just something about that snacking I find very attractive. As someone who loves to snack themselves, I'm like, Han would take me out to a dinner and Han would let me try lots of different things.
This is written in the stars.
And I respect that. So those are my current so I do feel like I chose my celebrity crushes as a kid old enough that they're evergreen, right? Like you can't say that you still have a crush on Topanga or whatever now, because that would be creepy to be a grown man who has a crush on a 13-year-old girl. Really hope that's not what you were going to say.
No.
I'm
No.
Preemptive strike. So I'm like, I like that I had the foresight to be like, I like that I had the foresight as a 14-year-old to be like, I need to choose someone who's 60 now, because I'm not going to be 14 forever. And then we can age together.
Do you watch the Apple series Shrinking?
Shrinking? Absolutely.
Okay. Because Harrison Ford is in that. And
I actually looks great.
And his character is probably right in that sweet spot of like, he's kind of like a bitter old man.
Yeah.
Right?
I love a bitter old man.
With
it's
just
my
this
favorite.
smallest soft spot. And if you can get it, you've got it.
Yeah. That's the thing. I like, okay, well, I don't want to say it like that, but I do like to think, I see it as a challenge. And I like to think that I'm the person who's going to crack the code on the grumpy old man.
Got it. And that makes sense, knowing Justin intimately as I do. I dream
His soft spots.
He's in my dream. I know all the soft spots. I know all your husband's soft spots.
Please don't.
That's the intro for this week's podcast, for this week's episode. So I'm just going with what jumps into my mind as like, oh yeah, I was like really. So Rosie Perez, white men can't jump.
Wow.
Yeah, that was like probably, I don't want to say first, but like as like where more than just the appearance played into it.
You're like, oh, I like a spicy attitude.
Yeah, that's really it. Like I liked a little bit of that like unpredictability, that like sass and like the firecracker-ness that she has in that. So that was definitely one where it wasn't just about the looks. Of course, also it was about the looks I don't know how old I was when White Men Can't Jump came out, but it's definitely about the looks because I was attracted to Rosie Perez, but her character as well. I was like, Rosie Perez. So definitely one that stands out in my brain. And then there was a Halle Berry phase as well that went on for quite some time.
Makes sense.
But then, like, my current celebrity crush, I don't even know if I have one.
Seiko's not going to hear this. It's fine. She doesn't listen.
No, like I don't think I consume enough. I don't consume enough media these days to have one. And like if I actually did say who my celebrity crush is, it's a Japanese actress, and very few people would know her anyways, because I don't think she's in it. There's a woman by the name of Kuroki Mesa who's probably up there on my list of current celebrity crushes.
Everybody Google it really fast.
We'll drop it right into the
actually great idea.
And one specific character. So there is a Japanese drama from about probably like 15 years ago called Ningyo Heruba, and it's about these Yakuza members who work in a retirement home. And of course they're like Japanese mafia, so they're like really like rough around the edges, but they're really sweet with the old people that they work with. And she was a character in that, and she was like a Yakuza member, and that's, I don't know, that I like that version of her.
Have you seen the trend? They're called Hear Me Out cakes. And a Hear Me Out cake. So the Hear Me Out cake is these people having parties where they come with pictures of their Hear Me Out. Their Hear Me Out is like someone that probably you wouldn't find attractive, but they find attractive, and they put the person on the Hear Me Out cake. So it's like they take turns going, Hear Me Out, and they introduce their Hear Me Out. Do you have a Hear Me Out? My Hear Me Out is truly, dang it. My Hear Me Out is actually kind of upsetting because it's not a human. And my Hear Me
What? Hear me out. Hear me out. But Shrek?
Addison is always so embarrassed about this, but specifically the fox from Zootopia that is played by Jason Bateman is my Hear Me Out. To the point that when we go to Disneyland, there's a person in the costume who's always in the same spot. And Addison's like, Mom, we cannot go over there. I'm just like, one more time. I just want to see him one more time. She's like, it's not Jason Bateman, Mom. I'm like, it could be. But that's my Hear Me Out of all time.
Yeah, that's my Hear Me Out would be just an actress who, I don't know, some people wouldn't find attractive. But again, for me, it's about the role. So like whatever role that they were in, I'm like, so I guess my Hear Me Out, that's a little bit off brand maybe for me. But the therapist in The Descendants. Wait, hold on. The therapist in The Departed.
Oh, I like The Descendants.
I don't know why my brain. So the therapist in The Departed is probably my Hear Me Out, but that character.
Oh, that makes sense.
It's not like her as an actress, like she's a good-looking person, but that character is the Hear Me Out. So she's in a relationship with Matt Damon in that movie, but she also has a thing for Leonardo DiCaprio. And if you haven't seen The Departed, it's probably top 3 movies for me, where you've got a plant from the police inside, not the mafia, but close enough, like organized crime. And then you've got a plant from organized crime inside the police force. And it's about a game of cat and mouse kind of between those two sides, but it is an incredible movie.
So what I'm hearing is that you just really like the acting process.
Yeah, that's really.
You can't.
I just actually like the craft.
Yeah, like it's the craft. It's not the person. It's their talent. It's their raw talent. I honestly think a Hear Me Out party would be great as a family activity when we're up there in Canada. I don't want the awkwardness. I don't want the awkwardness.
Like the Hear Me Out from Mom and Dad. I'm like, no.
Mom's Hear Me Outs are always just, Mom calls people hunky a lot. Like, oh, he's such a hunk. And it makes me like literally gag every time she says the word hunk.
But mom's crushes, like you are spot on. Like if we're talking about that, what are those charts called where things overlap in the middle?
Venn diagram?
The Venn diagram. Yours and Mom's Venn diagram.
Yeah,
there's an overlap of like Jeff Goldblum and Harrison.
She also loves Jeff
Goldblum. Sorry, Jeff Goldblum and Harrison Ford. I think I called him F.
I would also have to put Tuxedo Mask from Sailor Moon
What?
on there as well. I was extremely attracted to my best friend growing up had a huge crush on the grown-up Simba in Lion King. Obviously not the child Simba, but when Simba goes off with Timon and Pumbaa and then he becomes like a young adult. And we would watch both Sailor Moon and Lion King on repeat and just be like, I just really like the show. It's my favorite show. It was clear that we were just trying to watch our cartoon crushes on TV.
It's something we never did. So there's no overlap on this side. I don't know what you're talking about. What I'm hearing is that you and your friends still dress up as animals. You guys are furries.
Yeah, we're furries. Yeah. I would like to hear Daniel's Hear Me Outs. I feel like his would be really interesting.
His would be. I'm gonna ask him.
Okay, he's gonna guest on the podcast one day. We're gonna do Hear Me Out with him.
Christmas. Let's do it during Christmas. Let's do a live show.
Speaking of Hear Me Outs, today we're talking about Mac and Me.
So this is one of the few episodes where I was briefed in advance. So for those of you who are just joining randomly on episode whatever number this is, and you're like, what are these two people talking about? So usually our episodes are a little bit of stuff at the beginning. Jacqueline introduces a people, place, or a thing, or a piece of pop culture that was part of our childhood. We talk about that, figure out what kind of memories it brings up, and go down a few kind of like paths of the history of it or the why of it, and then we finish this podcast and people wonder why they listen to us for an hour.
Like why in the year of our Lord 2024 are we talking about Mac and Me?
People I don't know talking about something I don't care about. Reddit
probably never
like
seen.
Yeah. So I did watch it, and let me tell you how serious I took this.
Do you have notes?
I sat down and I said, look, if we're going to do this, I'm going to take notes while I watch this.
Yes.
And so I actually have it in here. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there is a Mac and Me. It says Mac and Me right here. So there is. And so I sat down to be very serious about this. About 11 minutes in, I realized there's no way I can be serious about this. And I sped the video up to 1.75 times speed. And I watched it by myself on Saturday night. Seiko was getting ready for some candle thing that she had the next day. And after it was all done, I'm like, I just rewatched Mac and Me. And she's like, yeah, it sounded like you were watching like a children's show, because she heard it sped up to 1.75 times speed. So she's like,
sounds like chipmunks.
Yeah, but I did watch it. I watched it at 1.75. I'm going to say that multiple times, but I watched it at 1.75 times speed. I still understood all the dialogue. It wasn't like I was just like watching it for the visual effects. And yes, I have some notes that, look, I was laughing while I was typing the notes. Like, why am I even writing? Why am I spending?
Please let nobody find these notes.
I passed out with some of them. The last thing you did was...
I had taken notes in my chaotic notebook that I always have with me. And I had also done like a deep dive into the history of Mac and Me. This morning, we went to church this morning, and I had to go a little bit early. So I went ahead of my family, and I was already sitting there waiting when they came in. And Aaron came in. He always brings like art supplies and stuff. And he had that notebook. And I was like, no, like no one at church can see that I've been writing notes about Mac and Me. So I like grabbed it from him and like stuffed it down in my bag so no one could see it.
All right. Where do you want to start?
First, I want to start with the fact that as I was watching it, I realized that I thought E.T. is Mac and Me and vice versa.
What?
Mac and Me, I have watched Mac and Me so much more as a child that when people are talking about E.T., I realize now that I've been thinking they're talking about Mac and Me. And I'm like...
You're talking about E.T., the...
best movie of all time.
Yes. Steven Spielberg.
Yeah. As I was watching it, I was like, oh, E.T.'s a different movie.
You were getting it confused with some McDonald's executives high on cocaine and acid putting together a 90-minute commercial.
So with that being said, do you think we should start with the history of how it got made first, or a rundown of the plot?
History.
Okay.
Then plot, and then some lasting impressions.
Okay. So the history is really interesting, actually. The man who produced it and who conceived of Mac and Me was coming off of Karate Kid. That was the movie he produced, and
Was
he
coming
wanted
off
to.
a drug-fueled weekend in the desert.
Well, and he said specifically he thought the new generation needed an ET for themselves. Never mind that ET was only released 6 years before this. So I'm like, hey, bud, it's not a new generation yet. Like, maybe relax, cool it. But he really wanted to make this movie, and he specifically really wanted the proceeds of the movie to go to charity. So it was like good intentions, I guess.
Which charity?
The
Specifically?
Ronald McDonald House charities. So specifically the McDonald's charities. Because of this, and with this idea in mind, it was kind of like I'll scratch my back. Yeah, I'll scratch my back.
I'll scratch my back. You also scratch my back. That's
We
how
don't
this
touch.
works.
It was
Right
an
from the
I'll
dictionary of
scratch-
idioms. I'll scratch my back. You also do the same thing.
I told you I forget every idiom ever whenever we do this podcast. So it was supposed to be like mutually beneficial. He's saying, I'll make this movie for you, McDonald's, where you are the good guy in it, basically, and the money will go to charity. In exchange for that, McDonald's needed to allow the movie to use McDonald's brand and also fund quite a bit of the movie.
But not directly.
But not
So,
directly.
Yeah, so it was actually funded through, I think it was like a food distributor whose sole customer was McDonald's.
Mhm,
So it
mhm,
wasn't
mhm.
like straight from McDonald's bank account to this guy's production company bank account. There was a middle person, and that was this distribution company, I believe. It was a food distribution company, and its only customer was McDonald's.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, too, after they signed this contract with him, they okayed the deal. Like a couple months later, they signed a deal with Disney, and McDonald's was like, I don't want to do this Mac and Me deal anymore. But it was too late. Like they were already, the ink was dry, and they had to make Mac and Me. And this food company had to pay for it, even though they saw Disney coming down the pipeline, and that's who they had next.
It was like very similar to, you see it in high school quite often. You also see it in Japan quite often, actually, which is a whole different thing. But you see like a really beautiful person who's dating somebody that's not that beautiful. And then they get like one step outside of that current environment where they were paired up, or they have been paired up with this unbeautiful person. And they realize that their options were so much more vast than they ever imagined. They're like, why did I ever waste time with that person? Well,
Yeah, but
that
they've already
person in this
said-
story is Mac and Me.
And they've already said yes to prom. And so now there's
Yeah.
nothing you can do about it. You've got to go. So McDonald's does say like they do want to retain control over certain parts of the movie, specifically like the way McDonald's is portrayed and the way that it's like clean cut, very fun. Like the McDonald's was over the shoulder the entire time saying what they could and couldn't do. One thing they specifically asked was that they did not use Ronald McDonald in the movie, which then the director was like, okay, I'll definitely not use Ronald McDonald, wink, 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 and then used Ronald McDonald almost immediately.
And also in the most absurd way possible. It's in some weird dance. And we'll get to this probably, but like the dance off in a McDonald's restaurant featuring Ronald McDonald.
And like, you guys know, I am a McDonald's fan. I love McDonald's. I've never been at a dance party at McDonald's. Now I kind of wish I had, though.
Like, do you have to sign up for those? Are they on a calendar somewhere where it's like the third Saturday of every month is our dance battle? Because the one thing I've noticed about that scene is there were no tables and chairs to be seen. There's literally no, just people they were all in the pit.
It was a rave.
It was a rave
McDonald's.
inside of McDonald's with a flying alien. Anyways, we'll get to that.
That's the alien itself was one of the ways the director was like, hey, we really need to set ourselves apart from ET, because he knew this was going to sound and look a lot like ET. When they conceived of this, there was no script. They hired a lot of people on and still didn't have a script. So they're kind of piecing together this entire movie as they go.
Didn't they I think I read that they needed to get the script done like over a weekend. Whereas like, we've got the whole company set up, ready to go. We need a script.
We need a script.
It's like the movie Sing 2, where they're on stage and they're like, the guy's like, next, you guys suck. I never want to see you again. and the pig, the German pig,
Mhm,
Germans
mhm, mhm.
again coming to the rescue.
Always the Germans.
Coming to the rescue is like, how about a space musical? And he's like, yes, that. And they make it up as they go along on stage. And they're like, yes, I will fund that. And then they have to put it together within weeks. That's basically how Mac and Me came together.
I was thinking about how you said, how come all of our best jokes are always about Germans? And this is where my brain went, was like, well, like our best friends growing up were Germans, so we're not being mean about it. Like, people are like, some of my best friends are Germans, and that
So
makes
what
me a
did
good
you
person.
say?
That makes
My
me
friend
okay,
has an
okay?
Oma and an Opa.
I wanted an Oma and Opa so
Same.
bad. To this day, I'm like, oh, Oma and Opa is so much cooler than a grandma and grandpa.
Agree.
Okay. So one of the things they had to do was really delineate it between E.T. So first thing that they came up was the character design and making Mac and his family to be the most unattractive beings you've ever seen in your life. One of the websites I saw described them as looking like a scrotum, which then I couldn't unsee. That's exactly what they look like.
And they're also just I wonder the acting coach or the person was like, yeah, do that, but look a little bit more confused, because the entire movie, they're just walking around kind of like staring up at the clouds, like so confused
with
about
their mouths in a permanent O, which I really hated. Like their mouths never change from this like, ooh, this little, because I don't know. It freaks me out. And also they're all naked except the mom wears like a covering across her chest, but the dad of Mac and Me is naked, completely naked, top to bottom. So are the kids, but only the mom has to wear like a top covering. It's like,
that's
okay,
where we draw the line.
Commit. If you're gonna do it, commit.
And they're little weird.
It's a children's movie.
Yeah. It's the costume design, terrible, is so bad. The little pot bellies.
Well, and then I was looking into it because I was like, surely these can't be people inside of this. And it's not. They're puppets.
Really?
They're puppets. They are puppets.
No. In every scene that they appear in, they're a puppet.
The only thing I couldn't figure out is if the parents were also puppets, because the parents are quite a bit bigger than the kids, but Mac is a puppet.
Wow. There are a few scenes in particular where I would like to know if that was true, if that was actually a puppet or not, because there's some running scenes to the point where I have my favorite scenes. I have a list, a breakdown of all my favorite scenes in my notes. And one of them is literally anytime Mac is walking or running.
Because it's like when you see a Muppet from the waist down and you're like, I shouldn't be seeing this. This weird.
For multiple reasons.
So, and then the other thing that they use to try and be like, see, it's not the same as E.T. is that they give him powers. That Mac has like mystical powers that E.T. doesn't have.
E.T. also had powers, didn't he?
I think all I can think of with E.T. was the glowing finger. Again, E.T. and Mac and Me, it's really hard in my brain to extricate them because I'm like, was that E.T. or was that Mac and Me? But I think Mac and Me, like being able to bring people back from the dead, which is a really wild one to have, and his ability to whistle.
I'm sorry, that's his magical ability? That is his... All right, Mac is very different from E.T. Mac can whistle.
As someone who actually doesn't know how to whistle, I was really impressed by that part. I was like, wow, I didn't know there was going to be whistling in this movie. So they pushed this movie out to the masses. Critics hate it, specifically because it has so much product placement. Besides McDonald's and literally be calling Mac and Me,
sure, there
is product placement from Coke. There's product placement
non-stop.
from Skittles, non-stop. And it's really in your face. It's not just like an E.T. where like he eats a Reese's Pieces and they're like, oh, he likes Reese's Pieces. In Mac and Me, they're like, they can only survive if they drink Coke because Coke is the only drink worth drinking.
For those of you who have not had the absolute pleasure and delight of seeing this movie, there is an episode where the entire family is on the brink of death, staring the Grim Reaper in the eyeballs, and they are brought back to life with a couple of sips of a cold Coca-Cola classic.
To the point that they say no to water. They're like, no.
They're like, no, I forgot about that. Like, no water, only cola.
No water. Oh, only full Coke. So obviously the critics hate this movie. Cisco gives it 1.5-star rating. They call it a 90-minute commercial. Mac and Me cost 13 million to make, and they only make back 6.5 million. So the whole, which makes me laugh because the whole idea was like, this is going to be raise money for charity. Like, no, it was not. It was actually going to lose money for charity, and that's
all of their money.
Much, much worse. So now that that's the history, and it is on like every list of the worst movies ever made. So truly, if you get the chance to watch it, you should.
And they say it's a cult classic, which I think is probably a little bit of a reach. I think what they mean is this is a movie that when people decide that they're going to have a night where them and all their friends do acid and or mushrooms, they're going to sit around and watch a movie that really messes with their brains. It's Mac and Me. That's the cult. That's the specific cult classic. It's like, let's take us like some hallucinogens and let's watch Mac and Me because it's going to mess with us.
Similarly, the cult is also just like a little horde of children in a basement, and their mom has given them money for a movie to rent, but like not one of the new releases, like a 99-cent movie. And like, I guess we'll get Mac and Me again. That's why I think I'm so familiar with this movie, because I remember watching it a lot as a kid.
Yeah, definitely more than E.T. Okay, one more cult. Okay, so if the cult they're talking about is really the cult of people on a campground, and there's that little like canteen, and you're allowed to rent one movie. They only have one movie. It's Mac and Me. That's the cult that this is for.
Yeah. So, because that's why I was trying to figure out why. That's really specific. It's the cult specifically, like when we would go on camping trips with the van that was a camper and have VCR in it, and some of us would refuse to sleep in the tent, and we would all pile into the van and watch Mac and Me while mom and dad were upset because we weren't enjoying camping.
That cult
specifically. So it came out in 1988, which means that, again, prime time for our family. I would have been 4, you would have been 6 when this came out. And I tried to get my kids to watch it with me because I'm like, I watched this all the time as a kid. And they came in and they were like, what? No, Mom, no.
There's a few scenes in the movie where I remember as a kid having like a weird visceral reaction to, and watching it as an adult, I still had the same reaction.
like why are they so naked?
Yes, that. And when there's like stumbling through the desert, like, and it's not like, I feel like the producers or the editors or a combination of both of them, they just let it stay for too long. Like I felt like I was getting a sunburn when I'm watching these. It
does move pretty slowly as far as movies of that time go. I think we spend a lot of time like in NASA, and I'm like, okay, why have we been in NASA for like 2 hours? So the movie starts where they're on a different planet. We open on this family of aliens. There's 4 of them, a mom, a dad, a girl, and a boy. And they have straws, which weird that alien species are just like using straws like the rest of us. And they're drinking up water from like puddles all over. And it's clear that like the planet has been like ravaged and there's not any water left on it. And while they're doing
what we assume is water, it might have actually been a planet of cola.
Oh, that's true. That would have been great. More great product placement. A NASA probe lands on it, and they're curious about it, and they accidentally get sucked up into the NASA probe, which then then has the longest title sequence as it goes to Earth. I was like, literally, that was such a thing of the 80s and 90s, was like super long title sequences. But yeah, they go to NASA, and then they are in NASA being tested on.
They presumably don't know. NASA doesn't know that they are in the machine. So they were supposed to be collecting like rock samples or something, and the entire Mac and Me family was vacuumed, which that scene in itself is hilarious. They're pulled into, and like the effects in this movie are so terrible. And at one point in my brain, I was like, yep, but it was the 80s, so of course they were terrible. But then I remembered E.T. came out years before this, and Alien came out almost a decade before this and was levels above Mac and Me. Like if you haven't seen Mac and Me, I don't go and watch it. Don't waste your time, or go and waste your time. But if you're going to watch a few scenes in particular, you want to see the scenes where they're getting vacuumed up which happens multiple times in the movie,
Strange-
for the record.
strangely
They get
enough.
sucked into vacuum cleaners more than once.
Okay, so the aliens get out of the probe and they escape into the desert, and this family of aliens is running through the desert. They don't know where they are, and Mac, the youngest of the aliens, sneaks into a car with a family.
But
It's
not
a family that's a
not
mom.
before. But not before he's hit by another vehicle and he is pancaked. There's a scene where he is pancaked on the windshield and it's just two giant googly eyes with like plasticine or Play-Doh stretched out on the
They
windshield.
specifically don't they say like an omelet with eyes?
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for, an omelet with eyes. I'm like, oh, okay, this is really
It's so
specific.
bad. It is so bad. That's the scene
And
where I
so-
sped it up. As soon as I saw that, I'm like, I forgot how terrible this is. 1.75
Like, I can't do
times
this.
speed.
So the family that he ends up with is a mom and an older son and a younger son. They're named Michael and Eric. It's clear that their father has passed away recently, and they're driving across the desert to move to a new home in California. I almost said E.T. Mac sneaks onto the car with them and is then taken to their new house. He's like wreaking havoc. He's drinking Coke and burping, and the boys are blaming it on each other. And the mom's like, "Stop being disgusting, you two." When we get to the house, we find out that the younger brother is in a wheelchair. And I'm
Sure.
not saying this just because I'm like, you need to know he was in a wheelchair. It's that the wheelchair does play prominently throughout the movie, the fact that he's in a wheelchair. The actual actor
And-
was in a wheelchair.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. So
Yeah.
that was one of the kind of goals for the movie, was that they were going to have an actor who was in a wheelchair play that role. And that kid, that was the very first, it wasn't an actor. Like,
Oh yeah.
it was like, all right, we need an actor in a wheelchair. Okay, none of those. Okay, we need a kid in a wheelchair, and we're going to make him into an actor over the course of a weekend. And that's
How about
basically,
you?
yeah. And he actually, look, he actually did a pretty decent job. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if we're going to take away one highlight from this movie, it was that kid nailed it for having never acted in his life before. Steps up to the plate and cranks a foul ball. But
There are two scenes specifically where the wheelchair really plays prominently into it. The first one is when they get home, the boys are kind of seeing like Mac out of the corner of their eye. The older brother like thinks it's his sunglasses, and he keeps taking his sunglasses on and off, and Mac is kind of like poking his head out and poking his head back in. And then one night they come out and the whole house has been covered in like things from outside, like a stuffed deer, like grass, trees, plants. And the craziest thing to me about that whole scene is they come out and the mom's like, "Oh my gosh, who did this?" They're like, "Eric, was it you?" The child in the wheelchair. I'm like, "Yeah, Eric went out and redid your entire living room in the night with only things from outside. He brought in picnic tables. He's in a wheelchair, mother. Why would you assume that Eric did this?" And she's like, "I can't even speak to you right now, Eric." Like, she was so upset that her son, who does not have the use of his legs, has redesigned her entire living room.
And the way that that scene ends is she goes, "I'm going back to bed." And she leaves. I made the note. I wrote that down. I'm like, that was her response. It's like, "I can't believe you guys did this." She didn't believe them that they had not, like, literally it looked like a home center, like the Home Depot garden center is now in their living room. And she's like, I'm going back to bed. And she just leaves the scene and goes back to bed.
To be fair, I have had points like that as a mother where I'm like, I'm not doing this today, guys.
I'm going back to bed.
So Eric is trying to convince everybody about that Mac is real, because he's getting blamed for all the things that Mac is doing. He goes outside and their backyard is on a very steep hill. Again, someone who had a child in a wheelchair, I probably wouldn't get a house that was on a very steep hill. And in their backyard is not only a hill, but a sheer cliff drop off.
We're talking Grand Canyon level.
Yeah. Yes. And Eric goes out there and he loses control of his wheelchair. He's trying to catch Mac and he loses control of his wheelchair. And my second favorite scene from this about the wheelchair is he plunges off the side of the cliff and just face down. It's not funny that he's in a wheelchair, but again, special effects in this movie being what they are, he plunges down into the water. Have you seen when Paul Rudd uses this on the Conan show?
Yes, I would watch it every time live, knowing that Paul Rudd would go on Conan. And every single time that he showed up on Conan O'Brien to do promo for one of his movies, they would cue up the clip for what Conan was thinking was a clip of the movie that Paul Rudd is in, and they would show this scene. And there were times where he got Conan twice in the same. He's like, okay, just kidding. Okay, roll the real one because the studio is really angry that I'm doing this. So now we actually do have to show the clip from Ant-Man or whatever.
Well,
and they redo the McAfee clip.
And he would be like, okay, what are we about to see? And Paul would be like, well, my character in this scene, my character is really developing his sense. He'd do this huge preamble, and it would just be Eric falling off a cliff in his wheelchair every time.
And I think if you could freeze frame one part of this movie that sums up the quality of the effects in this movie, is right when Eric falls into the lake that's at the bottom of this huge cliff that's at the bottom of the steep hill that is his backyard. There's a scene where like they show Mac like sitting up in front of the camera. That's the scene, because it is so misplaced, and it's like none of the like the depth of field isn't correct. It's literally, it's like we need something to fill in the space here quick, and they like just grabbed the camera and sat Mac in front of a wall, and they kept it. Like, it's just so like, bad. Perfect.
I also love that as this boy is drowning in a wheelchair in a river, everyone's just like, oh no, what are we gonna do? Eric, are you okay, Eric? And I'm like, can someone do anything to help this poor boy? The mom's like, get some help. Like, no, you're the help. And Mac is the one who helps him get to safety. He pushes his wheelchair out, and from then on, they're friends basically. And Eric is feeding him Skittles and Coca-Cola.
Well, they're not friends yet, because they haven't caught.
Oh, they haven't caught him
for the second time in a vacuum cleaner. So they lure him back into the house with straws and cans of cold Coca-Cola Classic. And then they capture him by sucking him into this like backpack vacuum. And my favorite part, I think this is the sequence, so I might be getting it wrong. Every part is my favorite part. They suck him up. That scene is hilarious. Then they have to spit him out. And I think the older brother comes in at that part to help him get spit out of the vacuum cleaner. I can't remember that to that detail. But he comes out, and Mac is looking sick. And I don't know if it happens right there. But Eric says, and I quote, "He looks depressed or something." I thought that part, that little soundbite, like, he looks depressed or something. I'm like, no, that's just actually how he looks all the time. That's the level. I want to find out that was unscripted. That Eric was like,
when I heard that part, I was like, what a progressive movie in the 80s to know what depression was. I was like,
was it because he was just sucked up in a vacuum? Because he's an alien away from his home? Because he's an orphaned child away from his family?
And the whole time and through the movie, it's clear that he's like trying to get a message across them, but he can only speak in whistles because his mouth is permanently in an O, which is really upsetting. So he's constantly just like whistling at them. He can nod and like shake his head, and he's like cutting out newspaper clippings and trying to like give them clues about where he wants to go. And they're trying to figure it out. But in the meantime, while they're trying to figure it out, obviously someone has to have a birthday at McDonald's. So we have to stop. We have to stop the entire movie, all of the pacing, all the progress into then, so that we can go have a McDonald's dance party where someone has had a birthday at McDonald's. I, for one, loved McDonald's birthday parties. I can't remember if we talked about this in our McDonald's episode, but I specifically remember going to birthday parties of people I didn't like because they were at McDonald's. And Absolutely. That was really exciting. So
they reroute the entire plot through a parking lot of McDonald's. Remember, there's a whole dance scene in the parking lot first.
Yeah, break dancing.
And then they route it into McDonald's, and they've brought Mac to McDonald's, but to disguise him, they have put him inside of a teddy bear costume.
Yep, like enormous teddy bear.
Yeah, and again, if you're going to watch only a few scenes, go watch this dance scene, because him dancing.
I will put them in the show notes.
So DreyerDrive.com, go there for that. The counter dancing scene where he like levitates to the counter and now he's dancing on the counter leading the entire group. And like the investigation unit of NASA or whatever comes in there and like, it's him, follow him. And then he just levitates out. Like the whole thing is so absurd. And the fact that Ronald McDonald is there for the dance party.
Yep. And not only that, they've explained that he's not just a teddy bear, but he's like kind of like a Teddy Ruxpin. Remember Teddy Ruxpin that could talk and move? They've been like, oh, he's one of those new animatronic ones. And like the parents are like, wow, this is amazing. He can levitate. That's shocking.
Flip fly, because you remember he like kind of like tumbles like a tumbleweed levitating to the front of the restaurant and then jumps on the counter. It's just so absurd.
And then the last act of the movie is they realize that he has a family. He has 3 members of the family and he wants to get back to them. So they go to try and find his family. They find his family in the desert, offer them cold Coca-Cola.
To bring it back to life.
Family beverage where they're like, no water, only Coke. And put them in the car with them. And as they're driving, they need more Coke because they've drank all the Coke. And so they stop to get more at a grocery store. And while they're in the grocery store, the aliens, Mac and his family, just wander into the grocery store. And obviously, again, that's one of the ones you don't realize their nakedness in the desert because they're not around other things. Like there's no context for their nakedness. When they're in a grocery store around like normal clothed people, I'm like, oh, they're really naked. And at one point in time, the mom is holding Mac, the alien mom's holding Mac, and a mom with a human baby walks by. First of all, the human baby's only in a diaper in a grocery store. The baby is not wearing clothes. And Mac and the baby
them trying to
like,
normalize the nakedness. They're like, maybe this wasn't
like,
a good choice.
Everybody's naked. It's fine. And everybody freaks out. They call in security. And when they call in security, Mac's dad gets a hold of a gun that he's just curious about. And it's classic 80s. Like, he doesn't want to hurt anybody. Please, if we only get to know
He doesn't
them.
Understand. And for the record, that scene takes place in front of a display of Coca-Cola Classic.
Coca-Cola, of course.
Like they knock it over and it all falls down. Like Coke is right there.
And they're like, we'll pay for the damage. I'm like, damage? It was 10 cans of Coca-Cola.
Do you mean you'll buy 2 cases of cola that you knocked over? That's going to be $4.99.
So they like engage in like the police take them outside and they're walking out there and they get into a shootout. And during the shootout, Eric gets shot, which was really upsetting for me as a child.
So, fun little fact, I'm sure you read this while you were doing your research. They actually cut out the scene where he gets lit up with bullets in the wheelchair. And that's not shown. It's implied. He kind of dies off screen. In the Japan release of Mac and Me, they kept that scene in the movie and you see him get shot. I checked afterwards. I'm like, this has got to be. And I checked. And sure enough, in the Japanese version, you see Eric getting shot as he's wheeling across the parking lot.
Riddled with bullet holes.
Shot, they just light him up. Like, it's him. Get him. But no, he gets shot. I think he gets shot like once or twice. And you actually see like him getting shot prior to the explosion that happens that then kind of like,
and you know, his family's all there. They circle around him. They're like, oh no, Eric. And as he's laying there, Mac's family then circles around them and they do this thing where they put their it's their ET phone home, right?
Yeah.
They put their hands together, the palms together and their fingers extended and like take the energy down and like put it down into Eric. It is so bizarre. And they bring him back to life. My favorite part, I wish you knew how delighted I was because I didn't remember this part. My favorite part of the entire movie was that after they save Eric's life, they do become citizens of the United States of America.
They get sworn in as citizens.
Ryan, that is the oath I gave. We talked about that. I'm like,
bearing arms or taking up arms against
arms, and I do this with no reservation. I'm like, I said these words. I went through the same thing. I'm like, so wait, does that mean Mac and Me is just like a metaphor for immigration in America?
Yeah.
Like,
Mac's dad's like, I already did it. I already bore arms. I already did it in front of the Coca-Cola.
I'm like, is this supposed to teach us like we should accept immigrants more? Like they could really help us. Some might have magical healing powers.
And that all leads up to, first of all, the unveiling of what they're wearing. And like Mac's dad is wearing like a powder blue tuxedo.
The mom's dressed like Jackie O.
And then they get into a pink Cadillac. and drive home.
It's the 80s, and then they drive off in a 50s pink
Yeah,
Cadillac.
and that whole scene starts with an absolute zoom, like an up close shot of the Cadillac logo with just a little bit of pink paint, and then they zoom out, and then it actually ends like every 80s sitcom starts, with like a family relaxing in a convertible driving across a bridge, wind in their hair, music playing in the background. Like that's literally how every 80s family sitcom started, and they're ending the movie like that. It is. I totally forgot about that as well. Like we got to this, I got there. I kid you not, this is where I stopped playing it at 1.75. I'm like,
Wait.
I need to make sure I'm seeing what, like, is this because there's something's happening into the file? It's been corrupted now. I've just been watching it for too fast for too long. So I stopped. I watched it at regular speed just for that scene. And I'm like, they're all closed now. Great fashion choices. Pink Cadillac.
Pink Cadillac, Mac, and then at the very end, Mac blows a bubble of bubble gum. And then it becomes a cartoon bubble at the end. And it says, in the bubble, we'll be back.
We'll be back.
Which, first of all, no, you won't. Nobody liked this movie.
They did have a sequel lined up. It was canceled immediately after release of the first one.
After they realized that only one family in Ajax, Ontario, Canada actually liked Mac and Me, and it was us, being like, what? This is a great movie. I don't know what you're talking about.
They're like, all right, let's sit down. Let's check the demographic report of the sales. They're like, there is a pin dropped in Ajax. Ajax. I believe it's pronounced Ajax, sir. Ajax on Dreyer Drive.
Dreyer.
Like it's over here on Dreyer Drive.
And it looks like they've rented it 36 times. Why wouldn't they just buy it if they wanted to watch it that much?
Let's go interview them.
I would also like to know why we didn't just buy it. I don't know why that was one of the movies that we just really glommed onto as a family. Like, this is going to be one of our family movies. We're going to watch Mac and Me all the time.
It was Mac and Me or The Stand. Or fried green tomatoes.
Fried green tomatoes. Or for a while, Daniel watched How to Make an American Quilt a lot, which is
I was just trying to remember. Yeah, also that. So okay, so this is not going in, but for the sake of time, because I've got about maybe 10 minutes left here, and I was wondering if I could just go through some of my notes on the movie and make sure that we hit them. So the very first thing I have written in my notes, 7% on Rotten Tomatoes was the very first. I have that too. Alternate Japanese ending showing Eric getting shot. So we talked about that. I also had this. I want to drop this for future episodes because I'm very curious. This one, I'm very curious to hear from some of the people that I know listen to this podcast around other terrible movies from that time period. Like I have Saturday the 14th, Critters, the Ben Savage Monsters movie.
Little Monsters. I remember that movie because Little Monsters, he pees outside. And I remember being like, oh, I can't believe I'm watching someone pee outside.
I've got Masters of the Universe, the He-Man movie. The Ernest franchise, Ernest Goes to Camp, Ernest Goes to Jail, and the Garbage Pail Kids. So I want to figure out where that fits in the future. But I have favorite.
Yeah, and I would like to do more of these movie ones because I feel like I would like to revisit these movies.
I would not like that at all because I feel like I wasted 45 minutes. So I have my favorite scenes. I already talked about a few. So the mom going, I'm going back to bed. Any scene where the aliens are walking, running, or diving into the water, because Mac diving into the water is hilarious. I talked about the vacuum, but there's a scene in there where Mac steals like a big wheels, like a battery powered big wheels. And he's drifting through the streets trying to catch Eric and his mom who are out for a neighborhood jog. And he ends up in the top of a tree because he gets flung out of this drifting. Anyways, that whole scene was hilarious.
And what I also liked about that scene was the music they played as Eric and his mom are jogging. Eric obviously cannot jog. He's in a wheelchair, but his mom jogs along beside them. They're both wearing sweatbands, which I thought was funny. And then they played like a love song about like, no one's ever seen me like you've seen me. And so they're listening to this like love ballad, and then right behind them, Mac is like on his Barbie Jeep,
being chased by a pack of dogs. Also, that's the other part, that I was being chased by a pack of dogs. And then the other thing I talked about, again, I talked about most of my favorite scenes, but the one thing that wasn't mentioned was the flood of nostalgia when there's the chase through a Sears department store.
Oh my gosh.
Because Sears is also mentioned and shown multiple times. So it's like funded by Sears, Coca-Cola, Skittles, and McDonald's, of course, the entire movie. But the flood of nostalgia, I could smell Sears when they're running through and they're like on the escalator. I'm like, I know exactly where you are. I can smell that scene.
Did you clock what Mac stands for? Other than Big Mac, obviously.
I did search for it on Saturday night. What is it?
It's mysterious alien creature. And they're like
alien and creature together also like
well, they kept on being like, it's not for Big Mac. It is a just happenstance. And it's like, okay, so what does it stand for? Like, oh, mysterious alien creature. Like, you obviously just made that up right now. It's definitely McDonald's.
Again, over the course of a weekend, this movie was strung together. So
if you have, honestly, we have differing opinions, because I'm like, if you haven't watched Mac and Me, you are missing out. Make sure you watch it with your family. It's perfect. It's a perfect movie.
And I will go back, if you are going to watch it, mushrooms would be a great way to do that, because I'm assuming
not with your children.
Yeah, not with your children.
With your family.
Wait till they go to bed. But yeah, it was.
I thought you were going to say wait till they're a little older.
Yeah. It was a lot of nostalgia. I wasn't ready for the amount of nostalgia, but it was also just such a terrible movie.
Do you find like sometimes like nostalgia almost feels like physically painful? Like you're like, I'm watching it and I'm like, like it hurts in my chest when I watch this.
Yes, and thinking about like how much time was wasted watching that movie. I could have been doing other things. And I'm watching Mac and Me on repeat in a rented VCR at 26 Dreyer Drive.
You know, we really should thank Dallin, because he was the one who shorted out the VCR because he kept putting hot dogs in it when we were kids. And after that, like after a certain point in time, Mom and Dad were like, we're done with the VCR. No one can have it anymore because Dallin can't be handled around it. And sooner or later, we did get a DVD player, but that meant all the movies that we were watching on VHS were obsolete after the VCR broke down. So I would like to say a public thank you to Dallin for doing a service to this family, because I do think our horizons really opened up when we were able to start watching DVDs.
We went outside and it was like that scene from Temple of Doom where the kids who are working in the mines are like, their eyes are burning because they haven't seen sunlight, because we were just watching
for so long.
Mac and Me on repeat for days. We went outside, we're like, this is what it looks like out here. So anyway, I'm glad we had a chance to go through Mac and Me.
If anybody else has any other ideas of movies that we should watch specifically from that time period, I'm all ears. I would like to do Mortal Kombat at some point in time.
Yeah, I need a break. Hold on, I need a message, Seiko. All right. Well, we're coming to the end of this one. Do you have an unhinged text message from a family member?
I do, but I am pulling from the archives from this one because I forgot about this. I screenshot a lot of our text messages just randomly, and so I have a folder on my phone of just that go years back before we even started doing a podcast. I've been screenshotting text messages that I just thought were ridiculous from our family. And so I do have, and I ran across this one and I laughed. So I laughed out loud at it because I was like, I forgot that this happened. It was from you. It was when you were still living in New Brunswick, and you texted this, just our sibling thread. Mom and Dad live in the country. A hawk just fully smashed into their giant living room window and died on their deck. and I answered, are you sure it wasn't just Mom? Daniel said, haha, that's crazy. Jonathan said, please send a photo immediately. And you said, it's already in a garbage bag. Daniel said, that's so bad. And then Dallin said, I too would like to see this dead hawk. And you said, it's gone. Plus, taking pictures of dead things isn't a good look. That's it.
And then we went months without talking to each other.
I love that was like something that happened. You're like,
Gotta tell them.
Gotta tell the crew. Gotta
on
tell
the
the boys.
All right. Well, as always, thank you to the people who've made it this far in any one of our episodes. We appreciate you. And we will talk to you next week.
Stay crispy.
Was that a question? Stay crispy? Are we still saying that?
I need to commit to that.
Is that really a thing that we're...
Stay crispy.
Crispy. All right. I'll talk to you next week.
Okay. Bye.